Of course, you're going to make it to the top. That's what one of my cousins said to me when I told him about my idea to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in a hand cycle. He said, look at what you've done. I'm like, college, 2 months after the accident, you became the best monoskier in the world. You won medals in your summer sport. You're in People magazine, 50 Most Beautiful People, which I have no idea how that would help me get up the mountain. But he said, of course you're going to make it to the top. He didn't seem to listen that it had taken me 4 days to get to the second camp on the scouting trip. That they'd had to push and pull me so that I didn't fail in scouting the mountain by not seeing any of the mountain. That I'd told everybody that I could find to watch. Because if you don't tell the story, it doesn't happen. And I risked failing publicly and colossally. At that point, to him, bold looked like a superhero able to surmount any problem. It wasn't really that, but I knew some of what he was talking about because I'd been captivated by a superhero the year before my accident. So I was at the ski race, and my first thought was, I wonder why that one-legged woman is here. And then I thought, she was what I'd never had the guts to be. In a sport that is so riddled with excuses, she was willing to struggle publicly. Now, when I was 14 and 15, I'd gone a year and a half without finishing a ski race. It seemed like failing became easier and easier and easier, and in some ways a way to hide, but she didn't hide. She struggled for everyone to see, and the biggest thing was she wasn't gonna quit. You just knew it. I didn't meet her that day, but I wanted to be like her. Little did I know I'd have more of an opportunity than I wanted. January 20th, 1988, the air was warm and soft. The snow was turning slushy at Berkshire East. My first day of Christmas vacation. It was most definitely not the Berkshire ice that my brother and I had known growing up. We took a couple runs before we were gonna train, and in the middle of a turn, my ski popped off. And I fell in the middle of the trail, hitting nothing but the ground, and I broke 2 vertebrae. Damaged the spinal cord. Paralyzing myself from the waist down and realizing my greatest fears, I went from 175 pounds down to 125 pounds. I couldn't ski, I couldn't run, I couldn't walk, I couldn't work out, I couldn't get out of bed by myself. The only option I had was my mind, which hadn't really believed enough to get me to the finish of a ski race, yet now was charged with creating an environment that would allow my body to heal and essentially allow a miracle. Because that's what I needed, was that miracle. Now, I saw the very worst when I broke my back, the worst thing that I can imagine, but I survived. And when I survived, I thought, I am never going to be intimidated again. It's not really that easy. I was growing a beard for the very first time, sort of a rite of passage for men. You know, you have to grow a beard. And as I looked in the mirror, I thought, this represents the patience that I need, because I'd spent the last 2 weeks ready to quit, to just get a job, to let go of this fantasy, this great dream of being the best monoskier in the world, being like Diana when I couldn't even beat my 90-pound monoskier girlfriend. Now, no slight to her, because she beat the vast majority of the men in the world, but it's kind of hard to be the best in the world when you're not the best in your own bedroom. It really is. It's hard to tell your friends. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be the best in the world. Yeah, I know she beats me, but yeah. But anyway, so now the best 2 guys One was a double amputee. The other was a paraplegic who could stand and walk a bit. Now, I was most balanced, I was only balanced, when I had my chest resting on my knees. When I hit a bump, it was a perfect position to do a front flip, or a partial front flip, neither of which I wanted to do. They called my class pumpkins sitting on a fence in the wind for our propensity to topple. I think it was supposed to be flattering, I'm not sure. I overheard our head coach talking to the double amputee, the guy who was the best in the world, and he said, "Jim, you're the fastest monoskier in the world," between mistakes. And I thought, this might be my opportunity. I can't do what he can do, but maybe if I can be closer to 100% of what I can do on every turn, maybe by the time I get to the finish line, maybe I'll have a chance. So I threw myself straight-lined toward the launch at Lodgepole, as much as every fiber of my self-preservation said, slow down, this isn't a good idea. I threw myself at the mercy of these gigantic moguls which beat and pummeled me because I had to face my demons before I got to the start. Now, the downhill in Lillehammer, Norway, my greatest memory is of the big jump at the bottom. We'd raced there the year before. I saw this jump when I raced there the year before. I saw it every single night before I could fall asleep. And as I approached this thing at 65, 70 miles an hour, I thought, okay, relax. It's a little hard. Roll your shoulders back and believe, stay committed, be bold. I flew for 60 feet, 4 to 6 feet off the ground. And then I finished and I had to wait. And nobody in my class beat me. Nobody in the next class beat me. Nobody in the third class, the amputees, the walking paraplegics, the guy who had said to me when I was going through deep snow at one point, "Can I give you a push?" None of those guys beat me. Until the final guy, the double amputee, and all I can do is watch. I'm watching the big scoreboard, and he's just behind me at the first split, but then he's faster than me going through the speed trap. He comes over the big turn, and then over the waterfall, picks up speed, 65, 70 miles an hour. He approaches the jump, and he flies, and he lands, and he finishes. 43 100ths of a second behind me. So when I'd first said I was going to be the best monoskier in the world, I'd been 30 seconds behind. 30 seconds is 60 miles an hour. That's a half a mile behind. Like, that was enough for them to stop, have a cup of cocoa, and still beat me. But I'd gone from a half a mile behind to the fastest monoskier in the world. The hardest thing that I ever did was retire from competitive sport. It was more difficult for me to retire than it was to break my back. My passion had woken me up early in the morning. One more set, one more rep. It brought me to the top of the mountain. And when I retired, I fell off the cliff into complete obscurity. The phone didn't ring. Nobody cared. Feeling betrayed by my passion, cheated. I cheated myself of that optimism that had made me the most powerful that I'd ever been back in the hospital. 3 years after I'd called it a career, I was out pedaling in my off-road hand cycle. I went up this mountain bike trail, and then I came down this trail, and as I was coming down this trail, this thought tapped me on the shoulder. It literally tapped me on the shoulder. It said, "You should climb Mount Kilimanjaro." And I kind of looked around, I'm like, where did this come from? I have no idea at all. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. Because when I'd gone 70 miles an hour on one ski, that picture didn't fit with the picture of somebody in a wheelchair. There are hundreds of millions of people in the world like me who are essentially invisible. If I could make it to the top of the highest place that I could find, I could force people to see beyond the wheelchair, to see me. So optimistically, I started a nonprofit. I don't know if any of you remember 2008, 2009. Not a good time to raise money. Not a good time to raise money. And we were felt like we were so close all the time, so we're spending this money and it's gonna come back, we're gonna be okay. And eventually I was paying my credit card bills, my personal credit card bills, with just smoke and mirrors, and I thought, I've got to tell my board, I've got to appraise them of what's going on. So I told them, the chair of my board called me. I thought, oh, okay, I've got to do this. I know I'm in trouble. But he said, I will pay. You get to the top. That's your home run. If I was going to draw the attention that I needed to draw, I didn't do this under my own power. If I was the first unassisted paraplegic to make it to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, that could shift that paradigm. That could force people to look at me that much differently. Problem was, I reached this point on the crater rim, and I couldn't get over these boulders. After 5 days of watching me struggle, 9 to 10 hours a day, my crew and the porters wanted desperately to join that struggle, and they thought nothing of the danger of carrying me up these boulders. They carried me up these boulders, but the 100 feet that they carried me, to me, meant that I failed. Meant that I failed my team, which had worked and sacrificed for 2 years just to give me the opportunity to try to climb the mountain, to try to affect this change. It meant that I failed those hundreds of millions of people who didn't even know who I was, but whose lives I was trying to affect. Crushed and livid, I thought, I've got to talk to Dave. Dave was my guide. He's the guy who developed this vehicle, sort of looks like a Mars rover. Like a Mars rover married to arm pedal power. He also ran up and down this 19,000-foot mountain 4 or 5 times to scout it out, to find the best route for me. And I got a quiet moment and I took Dave aside and I said, Dave, you disappointed me. You let me lie to all these people. You let me tell them that I could do this unassisted, and you knew those boulders were there. You knew that I couldn't do it. And Dave guides throughout the world, and he said, nobody climbs a mountain alone. Everybody does it as part of a team. From that moment in the hospital bed, I felt like I had to say, I can do it myself, for fear of being a burden to my friends and family, because if I was a burden, then they'd leave me and I'd be alone. But my struggle had empowered my team to struggle with me, and together we'd achieved the miraculous. I hadn't been able to surmount those boulders, but that 100 feet unburdened me of the obligation to be a superhero. Bold isn't a superhero. Bold's fear. Bold's fear and the courage to try, to fail publicly and colossally, to believe when my only reason to believe is my belief, the courage to support, the courage to protect, being in my body and not lost in my head. It's getting dirty, grinding, somehow making tomorrow better than today, even if it's by a tiny little bit. Bold is pure. Because it's me, just me, all me, my most powerful me. That's bold. Thank you.